Yes, indeed. It's a belated polling station with Johnny Ward and William Kedjanyi, who is so excited at the moment because he is between party conferences and he made the BBC. So his ego should be through the roof. But actually, as you'll find out now, it isn't. So we have to discuss all of this, how William's life is going at the moment, which is obviously very, very well. We also have to discuss new Green Party leader and what went on in Germany. But what principally went on in Brighton, William Kedjanyi, what can you tell us?
Well, thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Principally what went on in Brighton was, I think, a big consolidation of power by the right, the Labour Party, people around Keir Starmer, who are very happy with their week's work in the main. You saw a lot of protest from those on the left of the party who feel like they have been sidelined by rule changes in terms of how Labour elects its leaders. I think there was quite a bit of dissatisfaction and confusion, especially with the resignation of Andy McDonald from the shadow cabinet. And as is typical for a Labour conference, there was quite a lot of infighting. And I think that did take away from, any underlying theme that we had. We had some strong performances and some strong speeches and some great fringe events, but no one theme, I think, that really tied the whole thing together, which I think was reflected in Keir Starmer's speech. And although I must say everybody in Brighton was extremely lovely and very helpful.
Yeah, that's quite important. And as a means to go on from that, you featured in the BBC.
Yes, very, very honoured to do so. I was out there with the whiteboard, did get talking to the lovely press pack, who work basically on the Grand, the Hilton and the Hilton Metropole. They get sort of ferried off from the street. And basically you have this giant conference walkway where people go up and down and through on their way to various fringes. And it was really nice actually speaking to them, working with them, and luckily managed to get onto the news of the weekend.
Massive publicity for Star Sports by extension. But Keir Starmer setting out a serious plan for government. What did you make of his speech overall?
I think it was messy. When I say messy, I don't mean that to be a total hatchet job on Starmer. I just think that there were many different parts to this speech, and while some of them were really good, I felt he dealt with the hecklers very well. I think when he talked about his personal upbringing and his background outside of politics, he did come across with the conviction needed to tell a story and craft a narrative, but that didn't really hold. There were so many parts of the speech, so many features. I don't really know what the top line was, and it felt a bit like Prime Minister's Questions does nowadays. Politicians are aiming to hit the 6 and the 10 and Newsnight and other places with their clips that they can put forward and get a narrative hitting message out. And in that sense, they did very well. I think they came off quite well. And I thought it was interesting. Laura Koonsberg of the BBC said that Keir Starmer had shown conviction to win.
Strong conviction to win, indeed, from the website.
Yeah. I think, listen, he's clearly serious about trying to win a general election. Whether this week makes it any more likely is open to doubt. The polling hasn't been amazing post-conference. They were 8 points down with YouGov. They've struggled with YouGov specifically, though, Labour. And I think earlier on in the week, it was suggested by another YouGov poll that more Labour voters thought he should resign and stay on, which I thought was interesting. So all in all, I think the speech was mixed, with plenty of good parts and plenty of very confusing parts where he was talking about time zones for business leaders and Latin jokes such as carpe diem and the loom of his work, which I think all sounded better, all looked better written on paper to his team than came across in the hall.
any betting ramifications for this going into the going into the Conservatives conference? Because a lot of it's been a bad week for Brexit, really, in many respects, with the
Yeah.
optics of the lorries and all that. I don't know, we could go into that debate about why that actually was. There's a lot of panic buying and whatever, but a lot of challenges for Boris Johnson, notwithstanding that the furlough scheme is ending as well. Obviously, the economy's getting back up and running, but this is going to be spicy.
Yeah, it is. And just in terms of betting verifications, lots of movers in the next Labour leader market. In fact, the big ones are in my conference diary, which is up on the content site as we speak. But for the next Labour leader, biggest mover I think was Rachel Reeves. I think, well, not biggest mover, but I think the biggest impression, certainly amongst the delegates, I thought was made by Rachel Reeves. She is now 12-1 from 14-1, but she was as short as 10s over the weekend. We've also seen a little bit of a drift on Angela Rayner, who's now 11-2. Wes Streeting is 20s now. He was 25-1 from 50s. There was a lot of talk about him, and apparently he'd been fundraising an awful lot. He does have a position in the shadow cabinet. I imagine Labour will still make child poverty one of their sort of key calling cards and rallying cries. So he's set for a bigger extended run, I think, front and centre. And Nick Thomas-Symonds definitely is going to be front and centre if Labour are going to go as hard on crime as Keir Starmer has indicated. He's 28-1 from 33s. Some fluctuations here. Yvette Cooper's a bit bigger. She's 16s, she was 14s. Sadiq Khan went out to 18-1, now back into 14s, and Jess Phillips has also moved out. She's 25-1 from 20. So quite a bit of activity in that market. Andy Burnham is still favourite, but there are some really interesting prices there, some really interesting ones.
I'm sure that was one that definitely, I know it's sometimes interesting when you're at a conference like that and people know that you're coming from a betting perspective, but this stuff is really interesting because it gives some sort of, gives some sort of meat to the bone of the probabilities. Let's talk to Conservatives though, and the myriad of challenges facing Boris going into this conference. I don't know, you've got to have your whiteboard out here, have you?
Yes, the whiteboard is going to go up with me to Manchester. It's getting a break. It's getting a bit of TLC because it was battered by the wind in Brighton, and it made the equations of the car park outside the ground quite a few times. But we're still going, and at the moment, the Conservatives reasonably short for the next election. The next party leader betting, however, has changed quite a bit since the last conference. Rishi Sunak's 2-1 got clipped in a bit. Liz Truss is second favourite at 6s. Michael Gove is joint second favourite, I should say, at 6s. Jeremy Hunt 8-1, Dominic Raab 14-1, Sajid Javid 14s, Oliver Dowden 18-1, along with Priti Patel. That's becoming a rather interesting field too. There are quite a few names there. In terms of the conference plan for Boris Johnson, he'll want to reset, I think, a positive conference to sort of refresh the agenda and to kick on from, I think, pandemic-related matters. The only issue is, number one, the pandemic is not over. COVID might be endemic in England, but that does not mean it doesn't present major challenges. And secondly, they are kicking on into a winter full of crises. We already have seen it with the fuel shortages. Well, they're not fuel shortages, they're HGV shortages, but they might as well be called fuel shortages because it's impacting on so many people. Indeed, anecdotally, as I went to the New Startables office, there was a queue around the block that completely blocked one of the roads. So we had to take an alternative route. There was no diesel there. The situation is meant to be improving, according to the Road Hauliers Association, but it's not going to get perfect anytime soon, and knock-on effects can still be felt. Then, of course,
puts Brexit into focus essentially at this conference, which just makes it so interesting as well, because obviously the recent polls have shown that people think Brexit's not going well, even among people who actually voted for it.
Yeah, the ratings are really quite something. Long story short, even a majority of Conservative voters, along with a majority of Leave voters, now think Brexit is going badly. and those majorities are, not insignificant. So that says a lot, because whilst I think people to a point had moved on from Brexit as a voting issue, this might be one of the things that the Conservative government does get blamed for. And again, we're 10 or so years into this being in power, I think a bit further. And it's interesting that they haven't achieved, or they haven't received much blame for things I think that you could definitely say have gone wrong. So if this can translate into something, that's interesting. Because you look at it, 53% of the country think it's going badly. That's quite a lot when you consider all of the different subsections you have to go through, and again, not even able to get a majority, not even able to get 40% of Leave voters to think of Brexit's going well, is quite something. If you told somebody in 2019 that, I think they'd looked at you a bit funny, but here's where we are in October of 21.
Yeah, and he got elected on Get Brexit Done, but we still have this ongoing issue with the Northern Ireland Protocol, which itself is something of a proxy war, I would argue, and maybe that's for another day. New Green Party leader.
Yeah, this is interesting, and electorally, I actually generally think quite important, because the Green Party have been polling much better recently. They are, of course, I think, at the forefront. They've always been at the forefront of the climate change debate. That debate is now a growing issue. If you've seen the protests from Insulate Britain, you've seen protests all across Europe. Greta Thunberg, of course, is on today, ironically, another climate strike. And the Green Party looks set to play a bigger role, and they've taken quite a few Labour members. They're in more competition for quite a few seats than they were a few years ago, and in the shape of their new joint leadership team, Carla and Adrian Ramsay, they have a couple of very interesting co-leaders now, because they beat the pairing of Amelia Womack, who was a deputy leader, and Tamsin Omand, who was a founder of Extinction Rebellion. Now, Miss Womack is going to be the deputy leader going forward, which I think makes sense. She's got quite a bit of experience, but it's interesting to note that in recent successes, these pair have been closely involved. Carla was a councillor in Clifton Down, played a role in bringing about the Bristol City Council declaration of a climate emergency in 2018. Adrian Ramsay is a former deputy leader of the Green Party. He actually co-wrote the election strategy used in their recent council elections. So it looks like quite a serious team, and it's not as if they aren't going to have fertile ground to go on anyway. You're going to have plenty of climate-related issues. There is an energy crisis. There will be plenty of arguments that can be used to target the government, and I think we might hear quite a bit from them if they can get the media attention.
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be fascinating to see Green politics in Britain. Let's finish up in the German election. The SDP, 25.7% of the vote, and the CDU and the CSU, 24.1%. So it went the way we were expecting. When we last spoke, obviously, it was expected that this would be maybe a little bit more clear-cut, I think 4 to 5 sort of percentage points. But how did the betting kind of go between then and last Sunday of the election, and what's going to happen now in terms of coalitions in Germany?
The betting, I think, generally speaking, the punters did win. We took a rather lumpy bet on, I believe it was the CDU vote. No, sorry, the Christian Democrats, Olaf Scholz's party, basically winning that popular vote. And we thought for a second with some of the polls that we might. We had a chance, but it was clearly taken away from us. I think this was one for the punters, and the coalition arguments have already begun. They could take quite a while. Mr. Scholz wants a coalition with the Greens and the Liberals, which would, I think, be another winner for the market leaders. When we put it up with Patrick English, that was 100 to 30. That went off 11 to 8. Looks as if it will cop, and that would say that Angela Merkel would not be Angela Merkel's party. Sorry, would be out of power. Yeah, truly, which is quite remarkable. And to a 16-year tenure. It could rumble on well into the next few months, and Merkel's hardly departed yet. But Olaf Scholz looks to be in pole position to be the new chancellor, and it has to be, I think, one of the most remarkable turnarounds in recent political betting history, and considering where the two parties were when polling, when betting opened.
And it was a strange election where he went on a continuity ticket, even though he was from the rival kind of side, which seems to have actually worked. He was like, I'm a continuation for Merkel, even though obviously I'm not in her party. But it was a fascinating election, and it's interesting to see the repercussions across Europe as well. William, you're all jiggy for your latest political conference.
Yes, I am. I will be in Manchester. So if anybody here is watching, do please come and say hi, and hopefully we'll have the success that we did in Brighton. Things I'm going to be looking out for on the ground. Lots of leadership chat. I do think Boris Johnson will lead the Tories to the next election, but they are always planning something to do with a success, and I do think they have that hegemony in mind. So I'm looking into that. I'll also be taking the temperature about when the next election might be, because we're hearing lots of talk about 2023, and I wouldn't say that it's an absolute certainty that the Tories will seek to have this parliament run until 2024. I think they can go until May the 2nd on 2024. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think that's an absolute certainty. So lots to be looking forward to there.
Yeah, keep an eye out for the markets and William's blog as well on the website. Thanks for watching and listening to The Polling Station. We'll be back post both political conferences next week.